Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day. And you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Avacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's A-B-A-C-O. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, this island comes, I know, only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Now hear this. Man your battle stations.
The Obama attack on our Constitution continues. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com and join J.D. Benier and Christina Lamb and hundreds of Reagan conservative commandos who demand our country return to its founding documents and principles. We are part of the nation's oldest and largest GOP volunteer organization, the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. We register voters, endorse conservative candidates, and dig deep to give you the truth on the big issues. We are fighting to do what Lincoln proclaimed 150 years ago. Let the people know the facts and the nation will be free. Help support the Conservative Commando Radio Show with your donation today. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com. INRASuperPAC.com.
Now hear this. Man your battle stations.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the Internet. We're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360 and WIFI 1460. This is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos Radio Show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos Radio Show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome, fellow patriots, and welcome once again to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, the way we do Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and around the world on the internet via our internet broadcast partners, CPRWorldwideMedia.com, PatriotsRide.org, and VigilantLibertyRadio.us. And joining me today as my co-host, as she usually does on Friday afternoons, is my very good friend, Anna Little. Anna, welcome to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show.
Glad to be with you, Rick, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you too, Anna, and there's always so much going on in the news, and I was wondering if you'd have any comments about the recent Supreme Court decisions that came down yesterday and on Wednesday. Hello, Anna. And that sounds like a little bit of technical problem. John Forsyth Jr., did we lose Anna? Well, we'll Hey, Anna, are you there? All right, okay. Apparently we haven't lost Anna. Anna, are you there?
I believe I am. Hello.
Hello. Anna, just wondering, I don't know if you heard what I mentioned about, I was wondering if you had any views on the recent Supreme Court decisions that come down in the last couple of days.
Well, I do have views on them. You know, I don't trust that Supreme Court. I consider them activist judges, but I am very pleasantly surprised by the defense of the Constitution when it comes to those buffer zones in Massachusetts outside the abortion clinics. I think that decision was fabulous because it left very little room for any future buffer zone arguments at all. And free speech, the First Amendment, was protected fully by that decision. So I'm very excited about that one. I'm also really pleased with the limiting of the president's power, the executive officer's power in our government to do recess appointments, as we were very upset with Obama for doing. So I think there's hope that even these activist judges are not willing to chuck the Constitution as liberal, progressive Democrats would like them to do.
Anna, were you surprised that the verdicts on those two cases were both 9-0?
I am surprised by that, but I'm pleasantly surprised by that. And what I'm doing is checking my space in the judicial system to support the supreme law of the land, our Constitution. They may be activists on certain human rights issues if they want to try to define human rights, but they don't seem to be willing to mess with the First Amendment. And that's really very telling. Of course, I'd like strict constructionists, all 9 of them. That would be my pleasure, and that would be what I believe to be correct. But I'm really pleasantly corrected myself at my estimation of what these activist judges are willing to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy.
I just wonder what's buzzing around that little bonnet of that Barack Obama guy by being so slapped by the Supreme Court, especially on these past 2 decisions, especially in the decision on the National Labor Relations Board. That's
another one. You know, I think if Barack Obama has respect to the Supreme Court, he would be instructed by what's just happened, and he would change his behavior. But if he has contempt for the Supreme Court and feels that they're supposed to do his bidding, well, then he'll be angry, and we're going to find out.
My feeling is, Anna, he has contempt for the United States of America, period.
I can see the argument.
End of sentence. And that I don't think, you know, there are rumors that I've heard coming out of Washington that Barack Obama is about to double down again when it comes to these kids that are coming up at the border illegally, that he's ready to use his cell phone and his pen to make all these kids citizens. And so I don't know, Anna, if the recent rulings coming from the Supreme Court are going to have any sway at all on Barack Obama. I think he probably sees it, well, I got another 2.5 years to do what I want to do, knowing that there are gutless, spineless leaders in the House of Representatives who are not going to impeach him. And by the time he does something, it ends up in the Supreme Court. Well, the damage has already been done, or his goals have already been achieved. So I don't have a lot of hope that these recent rulings are going to rein Barack Obama in the slightest.
Well, I don't know if they'll rein him in. I think that my hope is that there is a court that will defend at least the foundational principles of the U.S. Constitution, and that is a saving situation for us in living under this regime, the Obama administration. So I think, we the people can have hope that there is an authority to which we can go for at least protection of the very basic principles that gave birth to this nation, the First Amendment being one of them.
All right, Anna, with that, why don't we go over our list of guests today? If you don't mind, at about 3:30, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valite. Dr. Valite is the 2007 recipient of the Voice of Woman Award from the Arizona Foundation for Women for her pioneering advocacy for overlooked hormone connections with women's health. Dr. Valite is going to be joining us to talk about, I think, something that's very timely and a little, deadly diseases crossing border with illegal immigrants. And one of the reasons that I say that and a little is I have here in my hands a report that swine flu was found at a Texas shelter that is housing these Central American children. And Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valite is going to be joining us to talk about that. So, Anna, who will you be speaking with today?
Well, I will have the honor of speaking with Bridget Johnson, who has been on the Conservative Commandos radio show with us before. She's a career journalist whose news articles and opinion columns have run in dozens of news outlets across the country. And she first came to Washington to be online editor of The Hill. She's also been an opinion writer and editorial board member at Rocky Mountain News. She's also contributed to USA Today, the Los Angeles Daily News Journal. The list goes on. And she's coming to speak with us today about the Senate action that comes down the pipe to block onerous EPA's water grab. So I think we really need to talk about these issues. As the EPA is a semi-autonomous organization, not really responsive to we the people, certainly not overseen or regulated itself by our elected officials, and seems to have the authority under this administration to act independently of Congress. So it's really important that we have Bridget Johnson on to talk today about what this EPA has been doing and what we can do as we the people in response to their activity.
All right, so we do have a great show lined up for our listeners, as we usually do, Anna. Anna, I wanted to get in the 3 minutes or so that we have before we have to take our first break. Wanted to talk with you. You are an immigration attorney, and I wanted to talk with you about these children from Central and South America that are flooding across our borders at an alarming rate. And Barack Obama in the White House said recently, well, they're very surprised by all this. However, I found an article that was published on Ellen West's website entitled Feds Advertise for Escort Services for Unaccompanied Alien Children in January. And Anna, if you think the flood of illegal immigrant children is spontaneous, we all need to think again. According to a Help Wanted post on fezbizops.gov, the feds were looking for vendors to help escort unaccompanied alien children in January of this year. Now, the specific vendor requirements were that they share the philosophy of treating all UAC with dignity and respect while adhering to the standard operating procedures and policies that allow for the efficient, effective, and incident-free transport. The contractor shall provide unarmed escorts, including management supervision, manpower, training, certifications, licensing, drug testing, equipment and supplies, and get this, Anna Little, necessary to provide on-demand escort services for non-criminal, non-delinquent, unaccompanied alien children, ages infant to 17 years of age, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, Anna Little, this came out in January. And yet it's just recently the Obama administration says that they're surprised by all this happening. Now, I just can't put the two together, Anna. Somebody's got to be lying here.
Yeah, well, it does seem suspect, and because there's been so very little honesty coming from the White House in general, I think many of us question first what this president says, rather than accepting it first and questioning it when doubt prevails.
Hey, Anna, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we are up against a break, and we'll pick this up afterwards. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Anna Little and Rick Trader. We're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the internet via our internet broadcast partners, CPRWorldwideMedia.com, PatriotsRide.org, VigilantLibertyRadio.us, and now you can listen to our show anytime, day or night, by calling 832-999-1199. Hey, don't forget, check out our websites also, ConservativeCommandersRadioShow.com and CCRShow.com. We'll be right back.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811, PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
Hi, this is Bob Viden, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittlesportshop.com.
can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Anna Little and yours truly, Rick Trader. And a program note, if you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show at 10:10 this evening Eastern Time, log on to patriotsride.org. That's patriotsride.org. And if you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show on Monday afternoon, log on to vigilantlibertyradio.us. And don't forget, you can hear our show anytime, day or night, from any telephone by calling 832-999-1199. Now, there are no extra charges for this call, but it would be a long-distance call if you don't make that call from a phone that has unlimited long-distance access. And I wanted, sorry to interrupt you before we went to the break. I wanted to give you an opportunity to follow up on what we were talking about, how the federal government, ICE, was advertising for escorts for up to 65,000 children back in January.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we're so suspicious of what comes from the mouth of this president is that there has been so very little honesty in this administration when communicating with the public, with, frankly, the people that elected him, the people that he represents. And there seems to be so little respect for us relative to our, the obligation to tell us what's going on, our direct right to know the truth about what's going on. That's why I think we're so suspicious. And I believe that, these indicators could very well lead to another exposure of some untruths that have been proclaimed from this administration. It certainly follows illogically, in logical progression, that the executive order that is being described in public media appearances as an opportunity for those who enter this country under the age of 16 and who wish to continue to study here can receive legal status in this country of what seems to be a semi-permanent state. I mean, obviously they say it's only 2 years. It would have to be renewed. We'd have to discuss it then. But there doesn't seem to be any definite end time to this. Now, the dates referenced in the executive order have already passed. And will these children that are being dropped at the border receive this status? Who knows? But the expectation internationally has been given by the public statements of this administration that if you drop your child off at the border, we'll keep them for you. Now,
that's exactly what is happening. That is exactly what is happening down there. So why should they expect anything else?
Right. And beyond this, it's exploitation of the children. I'd like to throw this out there for all of us to think about. If 83% of these children are 14 or older, still minors, these are children that are of working age in their home country. And I believe these children are arguably being exploited by the families who drop them off here because they're expected to get that work permit that President Obama said they could have and then go out and work and send money home. Mm-hmm. And I consider that exploitation of a child. So we need to be thinking about it from that perspective as well. And there are media outlets, if not the governments themselves of these countries, that are encouraging all of this. And here we have an administration complicit in the exploitation of these children. I put a question mark in my voice at the end of that because the case would have to be proven. But that's what I see going on.
And it
bothers me as a parent.
Let's talk about this exploitation of these children. It is my belief that this is all being orchestrated by the left, by the Democrat Party. If you get 100,000 of these children coming into this country, the next cry you could expect to hear is, whoa, we got to let their parents in now. These children need their parents. Well, first of all, it's the parents that are letting their children go. But, we got to let their children, their parents in. And after the parents comes the brothers, the sisters, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, the entire extended family. And when you talk about exploiting these children, Anna, I think these children are being exploited by the Democrat Party, by the left. And, Anna, the other thing that really upsets me about this, these children coming up through Mexico, a very, very dangerous place, are being beaten, raped, robbed. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are not being killed. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are put into the sex trade and human trafficking. That's exploitation, Anna. And if Barack Obama had a conscience, he would realize this and stop it by sealing our borders. That's exploitation.
I think that there is the opportunity here in the United States to secure the border. I don't know that I want them sealed, because sealing would mean nobody in or out.
Well, you know what I mean,
I think we
Anna.
have to allow people to go in and out. But there has to be a concerted effort on the part of the federal government in cooperation with the border states. And I believe the border states are willing and ready to cooperate with the federal government. It's the federal government that smacked them down. I'm referring to Jan Brewer, for example, when they wanted to do something about their own border protection. But at any rate, we need to see a cooperation between both federal and state-level governments along the border states and at our ports of entry, and that includes the East Coast here, the airports in Miami, the whatever's going on in LAX and other airports along the West Coast. It's not just a southern border issue. It's every border state in the Union. And, there are quite a few. So I think there has to be that concerted effort at two levels of government to enforce the immigration laws and to protect public safety. And they need to collaborate to accomplish that. And I do believe that with an administration in place and a Congress in place that has that as a purpose, and what better time to do this than now when we have terrorist threats and a very unstable Middle East. I mean, don't forget, we can't just look at domestic issues, guys and gals. We need to look at what's going on internationally, because that becomes the impetus for this particular domestic issue. So, I think we need to have an administration change, and I don't believe many of our listeners would disagree.
Oh, I don't think many of our listeners would disagree with that at all, Anna, but this administration change can't happen for another 2.5 years. Anna, we were lucky. We were very lucky.
Setting the stage for it now.
Excuse me?
We can begin setting the stage for it now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But, Anna, I think we were very, very lucky the first 4 or 5 years during the Obama administration that serious things haven't happened in the world that are happening today, with what's going on in Syria, with what's going on in Iran, with what's going on in Iraq, with what has taken place in Libya, also Egypt. We've been very, very lucky. Now, past year or so, things have not been so lucky. Things aren't looking so rosy.
Right. And then the question becomes, is it an overall plan? He's lame duck. Is this when that stuff is planned to occur? Mm-hmm. Or is it just the ripple effect of weak leadership on an international stage? I can't answer that question. What I can say is we need to be prepared here in the United States, because unless there is some settling among nations in the Middle East, if that caliphate is allowed to exist, we're in serious trouble. And I think the telltale signs are the financial decision of the Presbyterians in removing their holdings in those governments that have those companies that in Israel were supplying the tools necessary to occupy Palestine. That's a vote of no confidence on Israel.
I agree. And with that, Anna, we got to take a break, Anna. You are listening to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Anna Little and Rick Trader, coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philly, the way we do Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and around the world on the internet via our internet broadcast partners, CPRWorldwideMedia.com, Patriots Right, VigilantLibertyRadio.us. Hey, don't forget to check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioshow.com and CCRShow.com. One last thing, today's show is brought to you by the First Amendment, and it is protected by the Second. Be right back.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the Sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
The Obama attack on our Constitution continues. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com and join J.D. Manier and Christina Lamb and hundreds of Reagan conservative commandos who demand our country return to its founding documents and principles. We are part of the nation's oldest and largest GOP volunteer organization, the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. We register voters, endorse conservative candidates, and dig deep to give you the truth on the big issues. We are fighting to do what Lincoln proclaimed 150 years ago. Let the people know the facts and the nation will be free. Help support the Conservative Commando Radio Show with your donation today. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com. INRASuperPAC.com.
Now hear this. Man your battle stations.
You can call the Conservative Commandos Radio Show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Anna Little and yours truly, Rick Trader. And a program note, if you'd like to hear a repeat broadcast of today's show at 10:10 this evening Eastern Time, please log on to patriotsride.org. That's patriotsride.org. You can also hear a rebroadcast of today's show Monday afternoon at vigilantlibertyradio.us. But you can hear our show anytime, day or night, from any telephone by calling 832-999-1199. At this point, we'd like to welcome to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valite. Dr. Valite is the 2007 recipient of the Voice of Woman Award from the Arizona Foundation for Women for her pioneering advocacy for the overlooked hormone connections in women's health. Dr. Valite, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Thanks so much, Rick. It's a pleasure to be with you. Some serious issues we're facing.
Doctor, serious issues, and they just seem to, it's like a snowball effect. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Dr. Valite, you wrote an article about deadly diseases crossing the border with illegal immigrants. And in the preview it says, carried by this tsunami of illegals there are invisible, quote, travelers our politicians don't like to mention. Diseases in the United States had controlled or virtually eradicated, such as tuberculosis, sugar diseases, fever, hepatitis, malaria, measles, plus many more. Now, Doctor, I know that you have worked in Central and South America, and there's probably no one who's more qualified to talk about these things. So,
well, thank you, Rick. I really feel that what I've seen in both Central and South America is a much wider spread through the population of the drug-resistant form of tuberculosis, along with Chagas disease, which we have kissing bugs in the Southwest USA, but we have not had a problem with the disease, in part for lots of medical reasons, but in the immigrants that are coming in now from these impoverished countries where they don't have vaccines and where they don't have good hygiene and where the illegal aliens are now being crowded together in conditions that are not very sanitary and where they don't have adequate facilities to quarantine or to screen for diseases, then the risk of spread of infection is very high. And something I'd like your listeners to understand is that when you're dealing with infectious diseases, these types of biological agents escalate in the population. They have doubling times and they increase exponentially as long as there are people who can be infected. When you look at other weapons of mass destruction, in the bigger picture, radiological weapons have a decay process by half-lives, so they're constantly decaying. Chemical agents degrade in the environment and require a concentration to be to cause damage, whereas viruses spread like wildfire in crowded populations, and every single infected person then increases the spread of infection. And what they're doing with these illegal immigrants in this flood coming in now, there are two big differences. First of all, they're coming from areas of the world where we have a higher prevalence of all these diseases. They're not Mexican. They're not the usual illegal immigration pattern in the first place. In the second place, there are floods of them. Third place, they are rapidly transporting by buses and planes the illegal aliens into the heartland of the country, into cities all over the country, which increases the rate of spread, increases the people that will be exposed. We've already had swine flu confirmed in Texas. The Texas agents, I have a source that has helped me with inside boots on the ground information. They have confirmed that some of the illegals are here from Somalia, are quite ill with a disease that they have not identified yet. That's a part of the world where we see a higher prevalence of hemorrhagic fevers and very contagious, serious illnesses. Ebola virus is one, for example. There are others. And when you start looking at illegal immigrants coming from Africa, from Peru, Ecuador, where TB is high, where Central America, where you have all of these other infectious diseases, and you're crowding them, and you are dispersing them throughout the United States, it's a public health disaster waiting to happen. And all of these things have various incubation times, so we won't even know right away just how bad it is until people start getting sick. They've already confirmed in Texas that several of the Border Patrol agents tested positive for TB.
Wow.
And this has been, going on 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, that we know about.
Dr. Vliet, you know what I think people also must think about? I'm not the smartest. I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, doctor, but I love history. I love studying about our Revolutionary War history, about our Civil War history. And one of the things that I've learned through my interest in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War is how disease spread among the army. And part of the problem is you got a lot of young men, young boys coming in from the hinterland into an army that were exposed to diseases that they were never exposed to back on the farm. And those diseases spread like wildfire through the armies. I could see the same thing happening in this case, doctor, that you have these children that are coming here, that are being put in these Obama orphanage concentration camps in close proximity to each other, and that diseases spread through these compounds because they were never exposed to these diseases before. Doctor, am I off the mark here?
That's a big risk, Rick. The other thing, we know that the flu pandemic, people in the U.S. don't think that flu's all that big a deal, but it is. It can kill up to 50,000 people a year. And the flu pandemic of 1917 wiped out millions of people, and one of the hardest hit populations at that time were the military recruits who were put together on these bases and in transports, and the pandemic spread like wildfire. So what's happening now? They're housing a lot of these illegal aliens on military bases, which creates a vulnerability for our military population. We certainly don't need people getting sick when they are headed overseas and in the strenuous conditions of combat, for example. They're bringing the illegals into Texas and Arizona, both of which have high concentrations of older retirees who tend to be more vulnerable to these infectious illnesses. We have a high concentration of cancer centers in South Texas, in Houston, for example. Cancer patients are vulnerable. They are immunosuppressed. This is really a very alarming, and just June 25th, Investors Business Daily published an editorial describing the federal contract that showed that the administration had planned and encouraged this alien invasion. They actually advertised in January, and people can go online and read the article, but they advertised for escorts to be paid by the U.S. In a statement by the DHS Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they expect there will be 65,000 alien minors requiring assistance. So this indicates not only advanced knowledge, but planning to help it happen, and no effort to stop it.
Dr. Vliet, we Anna Little and myself were just talking about that before we had you on today as our guest. And Doctor, we're going to have to go to a break in about 30 seconds. But the thing that amazed me about that is when the Obama administration just comes out recently and says it's a big surprise to them. Hey, Doctor, could you hold for 2 minutes for a break?
Sure, happy to do it.
All right, we are going to take a break right now. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Rick Trader coming to you from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia. The way we do Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and around the world on the internet via our internet broadcast partners, CPRWorldwideMedia.com, patriotsride.org, vigilantlibertyradio.us, and don't forget you can hear our show anytime, day or night from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Please don't go away. We'll be right back to continue our conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valite.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the Sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
And this is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Anna Little and Rick Trader. And if you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show at 10:10 this evening Eastern Time, please log on to patriotsride.org. That's patriotsride.org. You can also hear rebroadcast of today's show Monday afternoon at vigilantlibertyradio.us. And by calling 832-999-1199, you can hear our show anytime, day or night. We're talking with Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valite. Dr. Valite has appeared on Fox News, Cavuto, Stuart Varney, Fox and Friends, and syndicated radio shows across the country. And we're discussing an article she wrote, Deadly Diseases Crossing the Border with Illegal Immigrants. Dr. Valite, thanks for holding through the break. We do appreciate your time.
Sure, Rick. I want your listeners to understand something else. It really doesn't matter what political party you belong to. This is not a political issue as much as it's a serious medical issue. These disease vectors, viruses and bacteria, don't respect boundaries. They don't respect political affiliation, and it doesn't really matter whether you're Democrat or Republican or a member of the Moon Party. You can get just as sick from exposure to these infectious agents. That's point number one. Second point that I think people need to understand is that this flood of illegals that are sick, that are carrying diseases that we've not seen in decades, are going to put a drain on our own medical resources. That means American citizens are going to experience delays in getting the care they need. And when you go to a crowded emergency room where these illegals with their infectious diseases are being treated, you risk exposure there as well. Mm-hmm. So people going about their day-to-day activities not realizing that these illegals are being mixed into the community, and New York, New Jersey is doing that in a large measure right now. Just heard on the radio that the New York City Council approved in the budget a multi-billion-dollar plan to provide photo IDs for these illegals flooding into the metro area so they can access all city services, open bank accounts, go to libraries, use your medical facilities, and so on. So all of the areas in the New York metro area are going to be exposed to the same diseases that this group is carrying, and estimates run as high as 60% may be carrying tuberculosis.
Dr. Valita, early in our conversation, you talk about how swine flu has been found at a Texas shelter for these Central American children, these unaccompanied minors who have entered the U.S. illegally from Central and South America, and it's been confirmed that swine flu is in the shelter. And Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas recently told Breitbart News that he thinks that the Department of Health and Human Services is doing an unsatisfactory job of screening and treating these diseases. And quoting Congressman Gohmert, he says, having spent the weekend on our border, I can tell you that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is not taking charge of the undocumented children in any kind of responsible time frame, as they are absolutely required to do so. It is becoming more and more apparent that the Obama administration's reckless disregard for enforcing the nation's laws at the border has become a reckless disregard for human health and life. And that was Congressman Louis Gohmert. Now, also
Not only is this an abuse and endangerment of the illegal unaccompanied minors who are being used essentially to achieve someone else's political agenda, they're endangered on the trip here. They're being carried by the drug cartels under horrendous conditions. They're separated from their families, so they are being endangered. The American population is being endangered all the way around. It's recklessness and flagrant disregard for the rule of law. And I think your listeners should be outraged that Congress is not applying the rule of law and following the legal immigration process. Ellis Island is right there in New York. We just honored people from all walks of life and different ethnic groups at the May ceremonies for the Medal of Honor, and they celebrate people who came legally, who have contributed much to American culture. I'm not against immigration. I'm against illegal immigration without proper screening, and I'm against the idea that the American public is jeopardized. If you're worried about a humanitarian issue for these children in their country of origin, then go down to their country of origin and help make changes there. Don't transport the problems to the United States for the taxpayers to support without any say-so and against the rule of law.
Dr. Vliet, also earlier in the conversation, you talked about something that I hadn't heard, that some of the border guards are actually getting sick now.
Yes, that was just confirmed today with some of my sources here in the Tucson sector. And I spoke last night with Zach Taylor, who's the vice president of the National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers, and he has contacts throughout Texas and Arizona as well. The border agents are quite concerned about how very ill the Somali illegal immigrants were, but they were whisked away and no one was told what they might have or what the risks were to the Border Patrol employees. I think the union for the Border Patrol employees ought to be screaming mad about the employees being exposed and not warned properly. And I think the public needs to be screaming at Congress to demand that this lawlessness stop, because it's jeopardizing everyone, including the illegals.
Well, Doctor, I think you got part of the Congress that agrees with you, part of the Congress that doesn't agree with you. Also, the White House has announced a plan to stem the flow of undocumented minors entering the United States. But get this, Dr. Vliet, But a large part of the administration's efforts are contingent on the Congress passing comprehensive immigration laws. So what I think's going on is, again, they are using these children as pawns to push their political agenda to what they want. Also, Dr. Vliet, some of these children, they want to spread them around the country, and New York officials have opposed housing unaccompanied children in Bethpage site, and that's on Long Island. And quoting Congressman Steve Israel, he's a Democrat, by the way, he opposes this proposal by saying the area is unsafe because the former grooming plant is located near a Superfund site. But there you go, Doctor. You got a member of Congress who is a Democrat who's saying, well, we don't want them in our neighborhood, but we could put them in your neighborhood. And also, I think, Doctor, a large part of this problem is not necessarily Congress, but it's the administration and it's the Justice Department.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and the double standard is appalling. And I would go, I think using the children as pawns actually takes away from the seriousness of the abuse that the children are subjected to on their being transported 1,800 miles through Mexico and through the countries of Northern South America and Central America. They are really using these children as weapons to achieve a political agenda, jeopardizing their lives and jeopardizing the lives of Americans and the lives of the employees who are trying to process all of these children. They just sent 140 Border Patrol agents to the Tucson sector this week, not to enforce the border, but to take care of the children. Well, excuse me, we didn't hire our Border Patrol agents and train them to be babysitters. We trained them to enforce the law.
Doctor, any idea who's paying for so many poor kids and children to get to the U.S. border from Central or South America?
Well, Rick, I don't have the answer to all of that, but clearly from the advertisement on the government website, the taxpayers of the United States are being stuck with the bill. The government was advertising for paid escorts to bring the children here. And that article, I encourage people to go and read investors.com, the editorial from June 25th. The title is, "A Federal Contract Shows Obama Planned and Encouraged Alien Kid Invasion."
Doctor, you also mentioned that you talked with Zach Taylor. In talking with Zach Taylor, did you find out anything about any kind of special instructions the Border Patrol agents are given about giving out information?
The Border Patrol agents, Zach informed me that agents have been instructed by their superiors not to speak to anyone about the numbers coming in, about any diseases, about the conditions of the processing centers. We're still having planes coming into Tucson almost daily, bringing 150 illegal immigrants with each plane load that comes from Brownsville, Texas, bringing them to Tucson to be dispersed among the population here.
Hey, Doctor, sorry to interrupt, but we are coming up against our break. I want to thank you for joining us today here on the Conservative Commandos radio show. If people want to follow your work, read your articles, where can they go?
Actually, follow me on Twitter at Health and Sense, HEALTHANDCENTS. And as new information becomes available, I'll be sending it out. Thanks, Rick.
Dr. Elizabeth Lee Vliet, I want to thank you for joining us on the Conservative Commandos radio show. Always great to speak with you.
Great to be with you. Keep up the great work and have a great weekend.
Same to you, Doctor. Take care. God bless. We are going to take a break right now. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Rick Trader, coming to you from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the internet. Don't forget, you can hear our show anytime, day or night from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Please don't go away. On the other side, we'll be speaking with Bridget Johnson from PJ Media.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Viden, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
The Obama attack on our Constitution continues. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com and join J.D. Manier and Christina Lamb and hundreds of Reagan conservative commandos who demand our country return to its founding documents and principles. We are part of the nation's oldest and largest GOP volunteer organization, the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. We register voters, endorse conservative candidates, and dig deep to give you the truth on the big issues. We are fighting to do what Lincoln proclaimed 150 years ago. Let the people know the facts and the nation will be free. Help support the Conservative Commando Radio Show with your donation today. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com. INRASuperPAC.com.
Now hear this. Man your battle stations.
You can call the Conservative Commandos Radio Show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos Radio Show. We are broadcasting live from our flagship station, WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world on the Internet. We hope you checked out our websites at ccrshow.com, CommandosRadioshow.com over the break, And we're looking forward to speaking this segment with our next guest, who our producer tells me is ready. So the honor of the introduction is mine. This segment, we're going to be speaking with Bridget Johnson, who is a past participant here in the Conservative Commandos radio show, so we're welcoming her back. Bridget is a career journalist whose news articles and opinion columns have run in dozens of news outlets across the globe. Bridget first came to Washington to be online editor at The Hill. Previously, she was an opinion writer and editorial board member at Rocky Mountain News and Nation World News columnist at Los Angeles Daily News. She's contributed to USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, National Review Online, Politico, and more. She also has a myriad of television and radio credits as commentator. Bridget is Washington editor for PJ Media, and we are so honored to welcome her back to the Conservative Commandos radio show. Welcome, Bridget.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm really glad you're here to talk to us about today's topic, which is the overreaching of the EPA, and I guess it's really hitting an all-time high with this latest overreach with regard to the Clean Water Act. Why don't you set up the issue for us?
So this really began back in March, was when the alarm was really sounded on the Hill about this. And that's when the EPA ended up putting a proposed rule out for comment that basically said they wanted to clarify the Clean Water Act to more define, streams, wetlands, different bodies of water that are protected by it. So even though basically the definition that they're looking for, this could reach into everything from a ditch on your property to some marshy wetland on your property to ponds to little ornamental streams, if you have, little ornamental creek in front of your house or whatever. If the EPA determines that somehow the drainage from this body of water affects something downstream or somehow runs off into a body of water that ends up connecting with another body of water, then that counts as waters of the United States. And so when this rule came down, members of Congress immediately jumped on this as, wait a second, this could be the biggest private property grab that we've seen from the government that we can even think of in recent memory. Because the EPA basically wants to cover, quote-unquote, most seasonal and rain-dependent streams, too. So if you have a dry creek bed on your property that fills up, just every so often, that could count, too. They say that these count for about 60% of stream miles across the country, so they want to reach into those because they say they have a considerable impact on the downstream waters. And so it's also a bit of a vague rule, obviously, to try and give them a lot of leeway, saying that, if they could reach into other types of waters that may have more uncertain connections with downstream water, and protection on those cases will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not it's significant. And
so I think the biggest issue with this, Bridget, is that it's coming directly from the EPA. Did this go through Congress? Didn't the Clean Water Act get shut down in Congress?
Well, and this is one of the things that Congress is trying to do now to try to stop this rule from going into effect, saying that, if you're going to alter the act like this, that it should come through Congress. If you're going to do something that's going to have such a breach on private property rights without a scientific review, without scientific basis, then that's not kosher and it needs to come through Congress.
Yeah, and I think, the private property rights, certainly we should all be good stewards of the environment. I don't think Republicans, Democrats, I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that. But then, for an individual who has not been found to have breached that moral responsibility, if we want to call it that, to have to subject themselves to inspections by the EPA or regulations by the EPA when they haven't done anything wrong, well, that becomes, an invasion of their private property rights. And I believe the spirit, if not the letter of our Constitution, would protect that. And, I think that there's serious issue here. But, what's even more important to me is the process and procedure. How is it that we have this semi-autonomous organization that calls itself in charge and able to make rules with regard to all things environmental, pretty broad scope, I mean, almost no scope at all, just everything, and yet there's lawmaking going on through the making of these rules. And, I think it's about time somebody stood up to this. What are your thoughts on that, Bridget?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if something like this, like what GOP senators are trying to do with blocking these regulations, if that got to the floor, if for some reason Harry Reid allowed it to get to the floor, it would pass. There would be enough Democrats who would support this. We had last year, we had an amendment to the Water Resources Development Act that basically prohibited a similar effort by federal agencies to expand their jurisdiction. And you had the support of 52 senators. So you've got, moderate Democrats who come from farming areas who know, stories like what we've been hearing. For example, a woman had a chicken coop, and then on another part of her property had sort of a marshy area that was, kind of like a puddle, and they determined that the chicken coop poop was too close to the puddle, and the puddle could have run off in a little stream at certain times of year into a creek that could have gone downstream, and this owner had to fight off this enforcement going on their property over this.
Wow, and that's a little bit extreme, because I can tell you, growing up, we lived in, I wouldn't call it rural, but there were farms with livestock in the area where I grew up in New Jersey, and I can't imagine trying to regulate where the puddles of water occur after a rainstorm. That's kind of pretty broad scope for the.
Right, and something that you brought up earlier is important to remember too in this case. You have a lot of Western lawmakers who have a lot of power on the environmental committees, and for example, the top Republican in the House on the Natural Resources Committee, who's livid about this regulation, by the way, is from Washington State. These guys are from beautiful states. They want to keep the states that way. There's no sort of collusion for environmental degradation or anything like that by opposing these EPA rules. I come from California, gorgeous state, but it's all about balance and not infringing upon that great Western spirit of your own land, your own property, and knowing that you're not going to be trying to destroy the environment, but there needs to be some brakes put on, EPA regulations handed down willy-nilly like this.
Okay, here on the Conservative Commandos radio show, we're speaking with Bridget Johnson from PJ Media. Bridget, great to have you back on the show.
A pleasure, thank you.
Bridget, all water runs off. All water goes somewhere, okay, generally speaking, to a stream, a lake, a pond, a river. And let's say, for instance, you and Anna was talking about a chicken coop. Well, my neighbor has dogs, okay, and the dogs go out into the backyard, and the dogs go out there and they pee and poop. So when it rains, we live in a low-lying area, and that water runs off into a cul-de-sac, and that cul-de-sac eventually ends up into a lake. That lake drains into a stream that ends up into the Delaware River, which ends up in the Atlantic Ocean. So what's to stop the EPA from coming to my neighbor and saying, your dogs are polluting the Atlantic Ocean?
Well, in that case, they'd have to get every deer, every bear, every every squirrel that's running around out there, and try and get them to poop in the right places. But what you have is a good point. Where does it stop?
Where does it stop? And that's what I was getting at. Where does it stop? It's ridiculous. And then, okay, let's say the same neighbor, or even me, who lives next door to my neighbor, the EPA could come along and says you can't fertilize your lawn. You can't have a garden and fertilize it because the water runoff is going to go into this little stream that's going to end up in that lake, that pond, that river, ends up in the ocean, and you're violating the Clean Water Act.
And I think that's a very reasonable fear to have on this.
Hey, Bridget, we're up against a break. Could you hold through a break for 2 minutes?
Turn the pump.
All right, we are going to take a break right now. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Rick Trader, coming to you live from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, the way we do Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and, of course, around the world on the Internet via our Internet broadcast partners, CPRWorldwideMedia.com, PatriotsRide.org, and VigilantLibertyRadio.us. Don't forget you can hear our show anytime, day or night, from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Our good friend, Mr. John Forsyth Jr., our own Silent John, working the boards, doing a great job. We'll be right back with more with Bridget Johnson.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. EnjoyAbaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
EnjoyAbaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Viden, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittlesportshop.com.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
And welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna and Rick. And a program note, if you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show at 10:10 this evening, please log on to patriotsride.org. If you'd like to, you could hear another rebroadcast of today's show Monday afternoon at VigilantLibertyRadio.us. And you can actually hear our show anytime, day or night, from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. We're speaking with Bridget Johnson. She's a career journalist, and she's with PJ Media. And we're discussing a recent article that she wrote, Senate Action Comes Down the Pike to Block Erroneous EPA Water Grab. Bridget, thanks for holding through the break. We appreciate your time.
No problem.
Bridget, you know, recently there was a Supreme Court ruling affecting the EPA. Now, that ruling was about clean air, but was there anything in that ruling about water?
You know, I'm not actually really familiar with that ruling.
Okay.
So I can't really comment too much on that.
Well, one other question I have, Bridget, before I throw you back to Anna Little, and maybe this is a question that you would not be able to answer for me. But if the EPA is controlling water rights, controlling water runoff, if that water runoff that the EPA is controlling does damage to my property, can I sue the EPA for their water damaging my property?
Wait, if the EPA is somehow steering runoff into your property, or
well, if they're claiming control of the water, okay.
Right.
I'll give you an idea where I'm coming from. In Oregon, about a year ago, we had a guest on the Conservative Commandos radio show who was arrested and sent to jail because the state of Oregon was claiming control water rights of water runoff of his property that went into retention ponds on his property. The state of Oregon wanted him to remove the dams on these retention ponds to let the water go free. So, I'm just asking a wild question out there. If, like in that case, if the state of Oregon is claiming control of the water, if the EPA is claiming control of the water that runs off into streams and ponds and rivers, if that water does damage to private property, can the property owner sue the EPA?
I have a feeling that they're going to kind of approach it like how they regulate automobiles, that you have to register your car and this and that, and if you misuse your car, then you could be subject to liability or fines or tickets or so forth. But then they'll say that the car is still yours, even though they have control over your use of it. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of splitting hairs of this in court, because it's definitely going to get taken to court, and that's. I think that your argument, though, is something that would definitely be brought up by people challenging it, though.
Can you see another case about this going to the Supreme Court?
It will go to the court if Congress is somehow not able to derail it.
All right. And we're speaking with Bridget Johnson from PJ Media. And with that, Anna, I'll swing it back to you.
Thanks, Rick. Bridget, I'm so glad you're talking to us about this, because to me, it's always that process and procedure. Are the laws being made by the legislative branch of our government, or are they somehow being made instead by the judicial or the executive branch? And I think in the context of the EPA, we definitely have an executive and judicial combination that tends to be making laws here that I believe, and we the people, I think, by an overwhelming majority believe ought to be made by the legislative branch, the Congress. I want to talk a little bit about the second part of your article. It says here that I guess it was the Farm Bureau that was being quoted here, but as a constitutional matter, the agencies, the EPA being one of them, are asserting an authority not granted them by Congress. And it goes on to say that as a practical matter, these kinds of rules, this one in particular, would mean increased enforcement against farmers, greater expenses for permitting, potential delays in the managing of their operations, and unquestioned exposure of legal liability attendant with lawsuits from activists. So, I think we should talk about the practicals with regard to this. Basically, in an effort to control the environment, the EPA may very well be shutting down the agricultural business in the process. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Right, and I think that this actually, it's important to highlight that when Obama said that this was going to be his year of action, that didn't just apply to executive orders that he's sitting down at his desk and signing. It also applied to things that were going to be happening at the agency level, but they're all unified by things that he wants to override action by Congress on, or in his mind, fill in for a lack of action by Congress. So we see this all coming back to the reason why House Speaker John Boehner wants to sue him. And this is so I think this needs to be viewed in that same lens as the executive orders, because it is all part of the same year of action plan. And one of the huge concerns, of course, up on the Hill, and like we're seeing from industry groups like the Farm Bureau, is that these actions are being conducted without input, without concern for how they will affect economic sectors, without they may affect people's pocketbooks from day to day, and so that's, I think, where you've got kind of a large coalition building to push back against this kind of regulatory action.
Yeah, and our producer, Rick Trader, did mention the Clean Air Act, and that was a few years ago when that Supreme Court ruling came down, striking down some of the interpretation the EPA had attributed to the Clean Air Act. And I think that there are some similarities, perhaps, between this proposed rule and what the EPA attempted to accomplish unsuccessfully via the Clean Air Act. I mean, it's just so broad that the EPA itself starts making exceptions, and then that leads to a successful challenge against the law in the Supreme Court. If the rule being made is so broad that you immediately see the need for an exception, well, maybe you shouldn't be making the rule. What are your thoughts there, Bridget?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, what lawmakers have been trying to do is put the brakes on this stuff and put it through proper review channels before you have to deal with something that's already been enacted and try to rein it in and try to chip away at it and try to, make it tenable and practical, and so this is kind of a, bit of a battle for a regulatory soul almost, up on the Hill right now. Whether they can dig in enough to be able to stop this wide-ranging EPA reg before it starts.
Yeah, because, I think even this recent Supreme Court ruling about EPA emission control, it seems like if there is a source that is, a large stationary source of pollution, that's proper venue for the EPA to be, exercising some authority. But the everyday lives of all Americans seem to be out of the scope. And it seems like this Supreme Court, even though it's split, they seem to be 5-4 on a lot of these rulings. I'm not sure exactly what the split was with regard to emission controls on the power plants. But at any rate, it seems like they're split when it comes to these environmental issues. But it seems the majority of those justices on the Supreme Court are getting the fact that we just can't have the EPA in the everyday life of every single American. It's just too broad a scope. And then, I add the caveat that, it's the legislative branch that ought to be making these laws, and for good reason, because, the thought process that goes through, they go into committees and they have to be introduced, and they go into another committee at another house, and then they have to be introduced. You have 2 houses in your legislative branch for that reason. I mean, you don't just wake up one morning and on a whim decide to make a law. I mean, it's got to go through the process. So, Bridget, I want to thank you very, very much for all the hard work you do in shedding light on all of this stuff. Without articles like yours, I don't think many Americans would know what the heck is going on, and they just wake up one day and be subject to these rules. So, thank you so much for that. Is there anything you want to add to the topic before we wrap it up?
Just what you said about the proper manner of legislating. It's like a recent thing that we saw was mandated fuel blends. If you had hearings on that, then you would have had industry, you would have had users come forward and say, wait a second, this fuel blend will damage my tank. But that is not something that the federal government delved into, and now it's something that they kind of have to clean up on the back end.
Terrific. So share with our listeners your website and any way that they can follow the work that you're doing in this important topic.
PJmedia.com is where you can find everything, especially from our Washington Bureau. And follow me on Twitter at Bridget_PJM.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Listeners, we have been speaking with Bridget Johnson. Bridget, I want to thank you for the time you spent with us and hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, we are going to take a break. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Rick Trader, coming to you from the CCRS studios, that of WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philly, the way we do, Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and around the world on the internet via cprmedia.com, patriotsride.org, vigilantlibertyradio.us. Don't forget you can hear our show from any phone by calling 832-999-1199.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811, PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
The Obama attack on our Constitution continues. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com and join J.D. Manier and Christina Lamb and hundreds of Reagan conservative commandos who demand our country return to its founding documents and principles. We are part of the nation's oldest and largest GOP volunteer organization, the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. We register voters, endorse conservative candidates, and dig deep to give you the truth on the big issues. We are fighting to do what Lincoln proclaimed 150 years ago. Let the people know the facts and the nation will be free. Help support the Conservative Commando Radio Show with your donation today. Log on to INRASuperPAC.com. INRASuperPAC.com.
Now hear this. Man your battle stations.
You can call the Conservative Commandos Radio Show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back, listeners. listeners, welcome back to Conservative Commandos Radio Show. We are broadcasting live today from our flagship station, WNJC 1360, in Philadelphia and around the world on the Internet. And this segment, we're going to be speaking with Amy Ridenour, and the honor of the introduction is mine, so I'm going to go right into that. Amy Ridenour is the chairman of the National Center for Public Policy Research. As the founding chief executive officer, she has promoted the conservative perspective on U.S. domestic, foreign, and defense policy issues. Her opinion and editorials have been nationally syndicated. Her articles have also been independently published by USA Today, the Sacramento Bee, Dallas Morning News, the Washington Times, Los Angeles Daily News, and many others. Amy Ridenour has served as a guest host on the nationally syndicated Michael Reagan talk show and is a popular guest on radio and television talk shows, appearing on programs like Politically Incorrect and CNN and Fox programs. Amy, we are so honored you could spend time with us this afternoon. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
I'm so glad to be with you.
So, Amy, I love the title of this particular item. The Constitution wins and President Obama loses. Talk to us about the Supreme Court decision in NLRB versus Canning.
Glad to do it. Basically, what happened here is President Obama attempted back in 2012 to use powers he does not have in order to make appointments to the National Labor Relations Board that this U.S. Senate was unwilling to approve. And he got sued over it, and yesterday by...
Anna, are you there? I think we've lost Amy. John, pick up the phone and see if Amy Ridenour is still there. You are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Rick Trader. And what's going on, John Forsyth Jr.? Oh, we lost her, so we'll get her back on the line. Hey,
well, I can fill in a little bit here while we're waiting for her.
Okay.
And just a little background for our listeners, Rick.
Yeah.
You might remember, listeners, when we were anxiously waiting the debate about these appointments that the president so ardently wanted to follow through on, and it never happened. You see, the president decided that while Congress was on recess, he would just independently appoint whoever he wanted. And that's what the background is on this Supreme Court case, NLRB versus Canning. So when Amy Ridenour comes back to us, I think we should discuss in detail what this decision came down to.
All right, Anna, we do have Amy Ridenour with us. So, Anna Little, please pick it up with Amy Ridenour.
Okay, so Amy, you were explaining to us the very, very important impact of this particular ruling, the NLRB versus Canning.
Yes. Essentially what happened here is this. President Obama, back in 2012, wanted to appoint people to the National Labor Relations Board who were extremely pro-union, very, very pro-union. And he could not get the approval that he needed from the U.S. Senate in order to make those appointments stick. So what he did was he pretended that the U.S. Senate was on recess when, according to Senate rules, it was not. And if the Senate is on recess, of course, he has recess appointments power under the Constitution. So he made the appointments while they were still in session. Now, when that happened, a lot of people were just absolutely shocked because no president had ever tried anything like this before, and it was extremely brazen. And I'm sure you folks remember back in 2012 when people were saying, my gosh, and we can't believe he did that, and things of this nature. Now, nowadays, we've seen him try to rewrite Obamacare all by himself, so we realize we have a president who doesn't stick to the Constitution. But this was really the first big case where he just said, I don't care what the Constitution says. My agenda and getting myself reelected is more important than that. So that's the case. Now, what happened yesterday? Yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court, 9-0, struck down what the president did. They said it's up to the U.S. Senate and the House. There's a little bit of power that the House has to decide when it's in recess. That is a legislative branch prerogative. It is not an executive branch prerogative. And the president was wrong to do what he did. and therefore the appointments that he made are invalid. Now, there were some other things that they did that not all the justices agreed with as to when you can have valid recess appointment power, but the important part of the case is that the president's decision to violate the Constitution was rebuked so thoroughly, even his own nominees joined in the rebuking.
Wow, that's quite the smack, I guess. But thank God, because we need a defense of this Constitution, especially with this administration. So, what's the ripple effect here? I mean, do these appointees remain in office, or do they now need to be replaced through proper procedures?
In the intervening time, the Senate did approve the nominees to the National Labor Relations Board the proper way, because this, of course, was 2 years ago. So in the intervening time, the actual NLRB situation took care of itself, at least moving forward. However, there are about 1,400 cases, and I don't know the exact number, but a number of subpoenas and orders and other things that the now illegitimate board members had voted upon. So those are invalidated. Now, for some of the cases, there's going to be new litigation, fights, things that could go on for years. For the bulk of the 1,400 cases, the new board, which of course is still Obama appointees, so it's still extremely pro-labor union, they're simply going to endorse those retroactively. So, to the extent that it matters, the 2 years went by, that'll be a factor. But the cases where it doesn't matter, it'll just go on, as if this hadn't happened. Truly, as big of a mess as it is for the NLRB, that's a side issue. The real issue was we have a president who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, who said, I'm not going to bother with the Constitution if it gets in my way. So we were really dealing with a cross the Rubicon kind of issue here. And happily, unlike with what happened in ancient Rome, when our guy tried to cross the Rubicon when the Senate said no, the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you get back across that river. You can only do what powers you have under our Constitution. So we passed the big constitutional test yesterday.
Well, thanks be to God for that. So now, there are some debates, though, with the right and the left that had been taking place while this case was underway. Can you summarize some of those for us? How was it that the left was trying to defend what this president had done?
Yes, although, to be fair, there were a number of very liberal people, Jonathan Turley, the professor many of us have seen on Fox News, being one of them. He's very liberal in his political beliefs, but he was extremely critical of the president for taking the steps that he did. There were others as well in the Congress and the Senate who were very much taken aback. Now, that said, people such as Harry Reid, the majority leader, Democrat Senate, even though the White House had taken some of the Senate's power, and he is the number one person in the Senate, so it would be his job among all others to defend the Senate. He defended the president instead. But what we do have with Harry Reid, and I don't think there's anybody who disagrees with this, probably including Harry Reid, is a man who is a Democrat first and a senator second. So, he went with what he thought was good for the party. Now, I work for a think tank. It's not my job to make a political party popular. I'm not so sure that they're so right about that. I think that there are many Democrats in America, and when we're talking about rank-and-file Democrats, I think the majority of Democrats in America want their president and their Senate to follow the Constitution and do realize that having a Constitution that everybody from both parties does follow is the real safeguard of democracy and human rights, civil rights, everything that makes this country special. So,
well, I've got to stop you there, Amy, and it's a perfect place to take a break. We've got to go for a 2-minute commercial break. We value your time. Can you hold on during the break?
Sure.
Thank you so very much, because we're not done with you yet. Listeners, we are speaking with Amy Ridenour, and we are going to go to break right now. We're broadcasting to you the Conservative Commandos radio show live from our flagship station at WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world via the internet. While we're at break, please check out our websites at ccrshow.com and Conservative Commandos radio show. And we'll continue speaking with Amy Ridenour when we come back from the break.
I really don't care Yeah, that's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
Oh, how I'm longing for the day when I'm back at Orchid Bay, where the silver water glistens in the sun.
When is the last time you raced a small boat across wide open water? Tired of snow, traffic jams, cold weather? You need a refreshing change of scenery, a world away. The Bahama Islands have vacation rental homes and apartments. Enjoy spectacular nature in the Abacos Islands. Enjoy refreshing Caribbean beauty, fishing, snorkeling, scuba, the beach. www.enjoyabaco.com. That's ABACO. Enjoyabaco.com.
As I sail across the sea of Abaco, smiling 'cause I know only one more mile to go.
Enjoyabaco.com.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos Radio Show, broadcasting live today from our flagship station, WNJC 1360, and around the world on the Internet. We are speaking this segment with Amy Ridenour, chairman of the National Center for Public Policy Research, and she's speaking to us about recent Supreme Court decisions and the protection of our constitutional rights. Amy, I'm glad that you were able to hold on during the break. Thank you so much for that.
Glad to do it.
Okay, well, we were just speaking before the break about the NLRB recess appointments and how the United States Supreme Court has sided with the Constitution and against the president with regard to his attempt to define when the Senate was in recess. And you know, the practical impact is that since that particular appointment has been confirmed, reference to the NLRB, it's just a 2-year period of cases that need to be relitigated or readjudicated in some way, but that the victory for the Constitution is paramount. I'd like to talk to you now about a case that hasn't yet come down, but that we're anxiously awaiting, and that's the one involving Hobby Lobby and conscience rights with regard to the Health and Human Services mandate. Is it possible for you to discuss that with us at this time?
I'd love to.
Okay, well, why don't you give us a little bit of background from your perspective on this? I mean, as I understand it, the Hobby Lobby is obviously objecting to paying for contraceptive and contraceptive and also abortifacients and whatnot. And it seems that there have been some kind of accommodations made. They're pretty complicated, and obviously they're claiming at the Hobby Lobby that this is not a real accommodation, and they're being complicit in something that is against their religious views. How am I doing?
Pretty close, but you've conflated two groups in the litigation: Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods, which are for-profit corporations, and the religious charities that the administration did create an accommodation for, but it isn't much of one. So let me talk.
Is that the Little Sisters of the Poor?
Yes, the Little Sisters of the Poor and others. There are many lawsuits, but that's one of the high-profile ones. But let me talk first about what's coming down on Monday. That's the Hobby Lobby case with Conestoga Woods, which is another for-profit firm that also objects to the HHS mandate. Now, the HHS mandate, for those who don't know, is a requirement under Obamacare that the law said the Department of Health and Human Services could write that requires that all health care plans that are issued under Obamacare contain, I think it's 20 or 21, what they call contraceptive devices or drugs for females. No contraceptive devices or drugs for males are included. They're not mandated. They're not covered. Men just don't count under the HHS mandate. But under the mandate itself, they have these nearly 24 items, four of which, in the belief of Hobby Lobby, the owners of Conestoga Woods, which is a furniture store in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that they believe actually cause abortion. Now, the reason that they can cause abortion is because they keep a fertilized egg from implanting on the walls of the universe, well, it's their universe, but the uterus, so that it can thrive. So the liberals, and I think this is a fairly universal liberal perspective, except for those few that are pro-life, say that you can't have an abortion until an egg has already attached to the wall, that fertilized eggs themselves don't matter. Now, that's a conscience question. Most pro-life people I know, the fertilized egg is the important thing, not where it is in the, part of its development. Okay, I would agree. So let's get to the law. Yeah, I think most people who are pro-life agree with that. Okay, so where are we under the law? Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods sued, saying that they're willing to cover contraceptives, like the pill, condoms, things like that, but not anything that can cause what they believe is an abortion. And they sued under the First Amendment, which is religious freedom, and a law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, passed in 1993 under the Clinton administration, and overwhelmingly passed with a majority of all Democrats and all Republicans, that says basically two things. First, that if the federal government wants to abridge the religious right of an American, it can only do so if it's extremely important to do so. Like, for example, you could restrict someone's religious freedom to save their lives. Like if it was somebody's religion to yell fire in a crowded theater, it would be okay to say, no, you can't actually yell fire in a crowded theater. I mean, it's that strong. And then the second thing is that even then, the federal government has to prove that it is the restricting religious freedom is the most unrestrictive way they have of getting this goal. So, in other words, where we're talking about the HHS mandate, if their goal is giving everybody abortion drugs, they would first have to prove it's incredibly important to give abortion drugs out at people's workplace. So let's assume they could meet that hurdle. Then they would have to prove that forcing the employers to pay for abortion drugs is the best way, indeed the only way, to effectively get abortion drugs in the hands of all women. Well, that's a heck of a test to meet, because first of all, people can get these drugs now. They're not even expensive. They go to the drugstore, not too hard. Right. The second part of that is, why does the federal government need to do this anyway? We've had a constitutional republic for over 200 years, and we never before needed the federal government to make sure women could have an abortion without taking money out of their own wallet, just out of their taxable compensation. So it's just an impossibly difficult test, in my opinion. Now, that, of course, is the way I see the issue. When they did the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court, 2 to 3, depending on how you interpret the questions, of the justices didn't see it my way. 6 of them appeared to. And it happens to fall on gender lines. The 3 female justices seemed to be skeptical of the whole concept of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. In fact, one of them was like, surprised that there even is such a thing, like they couldn't believe Congress would have passed such a thing, which, is sad because really that wasn't even controversial 20 years ago. But there we have it. Those three justices, it's possible that, in the intervening months, they will have been convinced. Two of those justices seemed very skeptical about the case yesterday during our oral arguments, and they went along with the majority yesterday. So it's not like they never changed their mind. But that said, my personal prediction, 6-3, Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods win. The HHS mandate would then be abridged basically to say if you have a religious objection to participating in this as an employer, then you don't have to do it.
Would you say, Amy, that these arguments before the Supreme Court protecting religious freedom in this way relate back to the founding of the nation? I mean, I guess freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of the press, all of this in the First Amendment seem to be the primary, or one of the primary reasons for the revolution which gave birth to this country. Am I right about that?
Well, yes, you are, of course. I'd say two things about that. First, one does have to define what it means to practice a religion. So you could make an argument, if you wanted to, that the founders were thinking about people's right to belong to their own church, their own synagogue, whatever, not so much being interrupted or being told to do certain things that they might think were against the religion. I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm just saying one could make that argument. The second thing, and this is very key to this particular case, because there's some question about what constitutes a religious practice under the law, and there was in 1993 as a result of a Supreme Court case that was over whether or not an Indian tribe the members could use a hallucinogenic pipe, basically, in their religious ceremonies that otherwise was illegal. And under the statutory law at that time, the court said, no, you can't because drugs are illegal. And the Congress disagreed. They said, this use of this pipe has been in this tribe's history for ages and ages. They don't mean it to get high. They're not partying. This is their actual religion. We're going to pass a law that says, no, government, you can't say to people who have a legitimate religious belief, we're not going to stop you unless, A, it's incredibly important, and B, there's no other way to reach that incredibly important goal. So the
Amy, I'm so glad you used that example because I think that's the way our government should work. The court should interpret the law, and when they're wrong, Congress should tell them differently. And I like that example very much. We're going to have to close the segment really quickly, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners where to follow you. First of all, what's your website or your Twitter handle or how you want them to communicate and where they can find more about this important topic.
Well, I'd love to have people visit us at nationalcenter.org. And yeah, we've got Twitter, we've got blogs, we've got everything, but you go to nationalcenter.org, it's all linked from there.
Okay, thank you so much, listeners. We've been speaking with Amy Ridenour, and we are going to have to close the show at this point, and I'm going to turn it over to our producer, Rick, to accomplish that. Thanks,
all right.
Amy.
Okay, and I want to thank you for sitting in today as my co-host. I also want to thank our other guest, Dr. Elizabeth Lee Vliet, Bridget Johnson, and our most recent guest, Amy Ridenour. But for right now, we're out of time. We got to go. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you next week on the radio.
Thank you for listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show. Huge thanks to our co-hosts, contributors, patrons, callers, and our friends at WNJC 1360 and WIFI 1460, where we broadcast live every Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 to 4 p.m. Central. Look for us on the internet at www.ccrshow.com. Until next time, we are the Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard.